Her fingers lingered at my collar longer than they needed to, smoothing the fabric as though the shirt itself had offended her. "You need more than a trim today," she said softly, almost to herself. I should have laughed, made a joke, but the words caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. Because it wasn't the cut that had me restless in the chair, it was her. She was older than me, obviously. Lines around her mouth, faint but elegant, spoke of years I hadn't lived yet. She carried them like secrets, as though every crease had been earned rather than endured. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands breaking free, brushing against her cheek when she leaned close. The salon was nearly empty, just us and the hum of the overhead lights. The faint chemical tang of shampoo lingered in the air, but beneath it was her perfume, understated, not floral, something warmer, a little deeper. It was the kind of scent you noticed only when someone was close enough to breathe the same air. I told myself not to stare, but my eyes kept betraying me, watching the way her wrist flexed as she combed through my hair, the way her lips pressed together in thought before she spoke. She didn't rush. Every movement seemed deliberate, as though she had all the time in the world and was unbothered by the silence stretching between us. "You always come in like you've forgotten yourself," she said suddenly, tilting her head as she studied me in the mirror. "Like no one's taking care of you." The words weren't cruel, but they pressed into me with more weight than they should have. I wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't wrong. Instead, I gave a half smile, hoping it covered the truth. "Maybe that's why I come here." Her eyes flicked up, catching mine in the reflection. A pause, long enough that I felt it in my chest. She looked at me as though she was searching for something I didn't know I had. I tried to shift my gaze but couldn't. Her fingers brushed against my neck while she adjusted the cape. A simple, ordinary contact, but it wasn't ordinary to me. My skin warmed under her touch, though her expression never wavered. She was professional, graceful, untouchable, except she was touching me. I realized then how quiet it was. No hairdryers, no chatter, no music. Just the faint sound of scissors opening and closing, the whisper of strands falling onto the floor. The silence turned every small gesture into something larger, sharper. "You're still so young," she murmured after a while, as though she hadn't meant to say it aloud. "You don't even know how much life will change you." I opened my mouth, but nothing came. She was close again, leaning in to trim around my ear, her breath stirring against my cheek. I wanted to say something clever, or at least something real, but all I managed was, "Maybe that's why I like coming here. You see it before I do." Her hand hesitated just briefly. Then, without answering, she returned to her work, her eyes lowered, lashes dark against her skin. The pause was louder than anything she could have said. And then, just as she set the scissors down and rested her hand lightly on my shoulder, the bell above the salon door rang, sharp and unexpected. Her hand withdrew. Her eyes lifted toward the sound. I stayed frozen in the chair, collar still half adjusted, wondering if she'd look back at me, or if that moment had already slipped away. The bell over the door chimed, and for a moment I thought she'd step away. But no one entered, just the wind, carrying a burst of autumn air before the door clicked shut again. She exhaled quietly, almost a laugh, and returned her attention to me. Her hand brushed my shoulder again, settling the cape more firmly this time. The pressure was brief but steady, and I wanted her to leave it there. She didn't. "You sit too stiff," she murmured. "Like someone waiting for bad news." I gave a small shrug. "Maybe I'm not used to people this close." Her lips curved faintly, though not quite, into a smile. "That explains a lot." The scissors moved again, but slower now, her movements less about the haircut than about staying near. I could see her in the mirror, the faint line between her brows, The way she tilted her head when she studied me, like she wasn't only assessing hair but something else beneath it. I wanted to ask about her. Instead, I blurted, "Do you always work this late?" Her eyes flicked to mine in the reflection. "Not always. It's easier when the shop is quiet. Fewer distractions." She didn't have to say what we both knew, fewer eyes to notice the way she leaned too close, the way her hand lingered longer than necessary when she guided my chin. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Minutes stretched, filled with the snip of scissors and the whisper of strands falling. She finally broke the silence. "Were you with someone before? A girlfriend, I mean." The question startled me, not because of the words, but because of the softness in her tone. Like she wasn't just making conversation, but measuring my answer. "Yeah," I admitted. "Once. Didn't last long." She raised a brow. "Why not?" I hesitated, then said, "I think she wanted someone who already knew who he was. And I don't. Not yet." For a moment, she stopped cutting. The scissors rested in her hand, her thumbs still pressed against the handle. Then she placed them on the counter and leaned lightly against the back of my chair. "That's not a flaw," she said quietly. "It just means you're still open." The word hung between us. Open. Her reflection looked older suddenly, not tired, but seasoned, as though she carried the weight of years that pressed against her spine. I wondered what she saw when she looked at me, what part of her was tempted, and what part recoiled. "What about you?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Was there someone?" Her lips tightened, then softened. She reached for a comb instead of answering right away, pulling it slowly through my hair. The teeth scraped lightly against my scalp, almost soothing. "There was," she said finally. "Once. He chose a different life." The comb paused at the nape of my neck, her hand stilling. Then she smoothed the hair down with her palm, fingertips grazing my skin in a way that didn't feel accidental. "I don't talk about it," she added. I wanted to press, but her voice made it clear that door was only half open. Instead, I said softly, "Maybe that's why you work late." Her breath caught, the faintest sound, but I heard it. She stepped around the chair, coming to face me directly. For the first time, she didn't shield herself with a mirror. She looked at me head on, her eyes tracing me as though memorizing a face she shouldn't linger on. The age gap was right there, unspoken but undeniable. 20 years between us. Maybe more. In a town where everyone knew everyone, even being alone in this shop at night could spark whispers. I thought about all of that. And still, I couldn't stop watching the way her throat moved when she swallowed, the way her hand hovered near my jaw as though debating whether to touch. Finally, she did. Just a fingertip, resting against my chin to angle my face slightly. Professional, maybe, but it wasn't only that. "You've got eyes that don't know what they're asking for yet," she whispered. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My chest tightened, and the silence between us grew thick, charged. Her fingers slipped away, but not before the warmth of her touch had already spread through me. She stepped back, almost too quickly, reaching for the scissors again as if nothing had happened. But it had. And the space between us would never feel the same again. The scissors hovered in her hand, suspended midair, but neither of us moved. A sharp vibration from my pocket startled me. My phone. I grabbed it quickly, trying not to break the fragile bubble of quiet around us. A text flashed across the screen. "Hey, want to grab coffee?" From a friend I hadn't seen in months. I hesitated. Should I answer? The light from the phone illuminated my face, and I could feel her eyes on me, steady, patient, as if she were reading something deeper than the message itself. "I'll get it," she said softly, moving toward the counter. You focus on that. But she didn't look away. Her presence filled the space behind me, a heat that pressed against my back. I felt it more in my chest than on my skin. I typed a quick reply and slipped the phone back into my pocket, heart still racing. Her shoulder brushed mine as she passed. Just a brush. But it lingered, deliberate. My hand twitched as if reaching for hers, and I swallowed, telling myself it was nothing. Close your eyes for a second, she said, the tone almost a command. Not sharp, not teasing, just firm enough that I obeyed without thinking. I did. The air shifted. I felt her moving around me, leaning closer than necessary, adjusting the cape, her fingers brushing my collarbone as she smoothed the fabric. My pulse thudded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Breathe slowly, she whispered. Her voice was low, intimate. Something in the closeness made the room feel smaller, the lights dimmer. I could smell her now, the subtle warmth of her perfume mixing with the faint scent of hair products. I opened one eye. Just a sliver. She caught me, smiling faintly, almost shy. Her hand lingered near my jawline as though weighing whether to trace it, touch it, cross the line we'd been circling for weeks. The scissors dropped to the counter. A deliberate sound that made my chest tighten. Then the bell above the door rang. Someone outside, maybe a delivery or a customer. The sound was distant but enough to make her jump slightly. She stepped back, breaking the spell, her hand retreating as though it had burned her. I wanted to curse the interruption, to tell whoever it was to leave. Instead, I laughed softly, though my heart was still thudding. She smiled, a fraction tighter than before, and for a moment we both lingered in the space of unspoken words. You're careful, I murmured. Her eyes flicked down, then back up, a spark of something unreadable in them. I have to be, she said. I'm not sure we can. A pause. She swallowed. Her lips pressed together, a tiny line of tension. I could see the hesitation, the careful fencing she did with her own desire. I leaned just a fraction closer, almost grazing her shoulder with mine. She didn't move. Not yet. I started, then stopped. My words failed me. The truth felt too heavy for a whisper, too reckless for the quiet. She tilted her head toward mine, eyes flicking down to my lips, then quickly back to my eyes. The air thickened. Our breaths mingled, our hearts racing in a synchronized beat that made everything else vanish. Another pause, heavier than before. I could almost reach her, almost cross the invisible line, but guilt and fear, of age, of perception, of consequence, held me back. And yet, despite the hesitation, the distance between us had never felt smaller. Her hand hovered near my chest, mine a fraction from her arm. Just inches. Just enough to know how close we could be. The room was quiet again, but something had shifted. Something undeniable. She exhaled softly, and I felt the electricity settle into the silence between us, an unspoken promise, a tension neither of us could ignore. And somehow, in that charged, suspended moment, we were closer than ever. The room smelled faintly of hair products and something else, warm, rich, her presence. I could feel it in the hollow of my chest, every breath tasting like the tension between us. She moved behind me to adjust a chair, and the brush of her hand along my shoulder sent a jolt through me I couldn't name. I turned slightly, just enough to catch her eyes in the mirror. The reflection showed everything she wasn't saying, the tight line of her lips, the pause in her breath, the subtle tilt of her head. You're staring again, she whispered. Not accusatory, soft, almost shy. I can't help it, I said, voice too low to fully fill the space. She laughed softly, a sound that made my chest tighten, and stepped closer. Her body pressed lightly against mine as she reached around to lift a stray lock of hair from my collar. The warmth of her hand lingered on my neck, fingertips grazing a place I didn't know could feel so alive. I shouldn't, she murmured, almost to herself. Shouldn't what? I asked, though the answer was written across her expression. Her lips parted slightly, and I caught a fleeting inhale that made my pulse spike. She leaned closer, our shoulders touching, and I realized I could hear her heartbeat. My own thudded in reply, wild, unsteady. I can't pretend this isn't happening, she said, voice barely audible. My stomach tightened. Her confession wasn't dramatic, not even fully formed, but it landed inside me with the weight of everything we'd avoided saying. I swallowed, trembling slightly, reaching without thinking to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers lingered longer than necessary, brushing her temple. She didn't pull back. Instead, she leaned toward me, ever so slightly, letting her cheek almost brush mine. You have no idea how careful I've had to be, she murmured, eyes lowering, then lifting again to meet mine. The words were dangerous, addictive, and I wanted to respond with a bold truth, but fear and desire tangled into knots in my throat. I could feel the history, the years between us, the world outside that would never approve. And yet, in this moment, none of that mattered. None of it could reach us here. I leaned closer, our breaths mingling now, hot and trembling, the faint scent of her perfume filling my senses. Her hand slid to my chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath my ribs. I wanted, needed, to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. She tipped her head, her lips almost brushing mine. Time slowed. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the faint pressure of her hand, the soft brush of her cheek against mine. Every sense sharpened. And then, the bell above the door rang sharply, a jarring, outside world reminder that everything was still tethered to reality. She froze. I froze. The tiny bubble of desire shattered like glass, leaving our foreheads nearly touching, our hands still brushing, hearts racing in unison. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Only the hum of the overhead lights, the faint scrape of scissors she'd set down, and the echo of a possibility neither of us could fully claim. You, I began, voice low, thick, but she placed a finger against my lips, halting me. Her eyes held mine with a mixture of warning and invitation, desire and fear. Not yet, she whispered, but the word carried everything we'd been skirting around for weeks. And still, the air between us was charged, humming, a promise poised at the edge. One move, one word, one kiss, and nothing could go back to the way it was before. I had thought we were alone. The salon, quiet as a held breath, seemed ours. Every brush of her hand, every glance in the mirror, had felt like a private universe where nothing else could touch us. Then came the voice, soft, too familiar, carrying a weight neither of us expected. Hey, didn't know you were still open. I froze. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Her hand stilled at my collar. She didn't turn around, but I could feel her body tense against mine, rigid like a wire stretched too tight. It was her friend. Not anyone we'd planned for, not a customer, just someone she had confided in before, someone who had laughed with her, shared secrets we didn't know existed. For a moment, the room felt too small. The air itself seemed to press against us, making every movement impossible. I felt her shoulder brush mine as she leaned slightly, as if trying to shield me, or perhaps herself. I can explain, she said, voice low, but the tremor betrayed her calm. Her hand brushed my back lightly. I felt the warmth, the friction, and it only made the tension thicker. No, wait, I said, trying to sound casual, but my fingers twitched at the hem of the cape. My pulse was wild. It's fine. I just didn't expect. She swallowed, eyes flicking toward the open doorway, then back at me. I wasn't expecting you either. The friend stepped inside fully now, noticing the closeness between us. I could see the slight lift of her eyebrows, the subtle curve of her lips, an unspoken question, a recognition we hadn't intended. My stomach twisted. Every glance felt too loud, every breath too obvious. I wanted to step back, to give her space, but even in retreat my hand brushed hers. A spark leapt through me, undeniable. She exhaled slowly, almost a shiver. I didn't tell anyone. The words hit me like a pulse. Not the friend. Not the outside world. Just her. She had withheld something. Her own feelings, her own truth, from everyone, and now it was here, suspended between us like a wire we could either cross or snap. Her hand lingered near mine on the counter, just a fraction apart, a whisper of contact. I wanted to close the gap, to let the space vanish completely. But fear, shame, the world outside, all conspired to make me hesitate. I looked at her in the mirror. She wasn't just beautiful, she was luminous in a quiet, dangerous way. Every line of her jaw, every shadow of her eyes, every tremor in her fingers told me she felt the same pull. And yet she was holding back, shielding herself with the smallest movements. A step back, a hand lifted to her collar, a swallow that trembled in her throat. I couldn't resist anymore. I leaned just enough that our arms brushed, sending a current up my spine. She inhaled sharply, the motion subtle, almost silent, but I felt it in my chest. Her eyes found mine, wide, vulnerable, and yet daring. I can't keep pretending, I said, voice barely above a whisper. My fingers brushed the edge of her wrist, not holding, not fully touching, but close enough that she could feel my intention. She trembled slightly, lips parting. Then maybe, we don't have to. The room seemed to shrink again, contracting around the heat between us. Every sound, scissors on the counter, the faint hum of lights, was magnified in the charged silence. Every glance, every near touch, carried the weight of possibility. And in that heartbeat suspended between risk and desire, between fear and inevitability, we both knew the next move would change everything. I stepped closer, she didn't pull away. Our breaths mingled in the thin space, fingers brushing just enough to send electricity coursing, and the world outside, the friend, the expectations, the years between us, felt impossibly far away. One step more. One word. One touch. Everything was about to break. The salon was quiet again, the earlier interruption gone but leaving a residue of awareness that neither of us could shake. We stood near the chair, closer than ever, breaths mingling in the narrow space between us. My chest brushed hers when I shifted, the warmth radiating like a live wire. I shouldn't, she whispered, voice tight but soft. Her hands hovered near my arms, unsure whether to push away or hold on. Shouldn't what? I asked, though I knew. I could feel it in the tremor of her fingers, the hesitation in her eyes. She looked down, then back at me, as if weighing the consequences against something deeper. It's complicated. People will talk. I reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. My thumb lingered on her cheek, feeling the smooth warmth there, and she leaned slightly into the touch. Her breath itched, barely audible, and the tiny shift in her body told me everything. I don't care, I said quietly. Not tonight. Not this. Her lips parted, eyes searching mine for hesitation, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The hum of the lights above, the faint scrape of scissors on the counter, even the muted city noises outside. The world existed, but it didn't touch us. She swallowed, trembling slightly, then stepped just close enough that our bodies almost aligned. I felt the soft press of her chest against mine, the brush of her hair across my collarbone, the warmth of her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "I've been careful," she admitted, voice breaking, "because I didn't know if it was real." I smiled, a small, tense thing, and leaned just a fraction closer, my forehead nearly brushing hers. "It's real," I whispered. "Every look, every touch, every silence." Her eyes flickered to my lips, then back to mine, and I saw the flicker of surrender there, tentative, trembling, beautiful. She wasn't holding back anymore, but neither was I. The space between us collapsed slowly, deliberately. Our breaths intermingled. Her hand slid from my shoulder to my arm, tentative, seeking permission. I didn't stop her. Instead, I let my fingers find hers, brushing, curling, until her palm pressed against mine. "You're terrifying," she murmured, voice low and urgent. "And irresistible." "I feel the same," I said, tone rough with truth. My thumb traced the back of her hand, the simplest contact, and it carried everything: want, fear, longing. Time slowed. Each heartbeat was a drum in my chest. Each inhalation carried the scent of her, the warmth of her body, the quiet confession in her eyes. I could feel the years between us, the caution, the restraint, all dissolving in the small universe we had carved out together. "Then don't hold back," I whispered, voice so low she could only hear me. She trembled, a laugh caught in her throat, and leaned fully against me. Our foreheads touched. Our breaths tangled. Everything we had been skirting for weeks, the desire, the fear, the stolen glances, the near confessions, collapsed into this single, fragile, luminous moment. We didn't speak. Words would have ruined it. Instead, we just let ourselves exist like this, suspended, close, human, messy, alive. And in that quiet surrender, we understood each other fully. The hesitation, the fear, the longing, all of it melted into a shared heartbeat. We could step back, leave the world intact, or we could let it happen. We chose. The decision wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And as we held each other, foreheads pressed, hands entwined, the rest of the world fell away. In that small, trembling space, we didn't need words. We understood. We were here. The salon lights had dimmed, the hum of the city outside softened into a gentle murmur. We didn't speak right away. Words felt unnecessary, even impossible, after the surrender of the night before. I rested my head near hers as we stood by the chair, bodies close but calm now, the frantic pulse of desire replaced by something steadier, warmer. Her hair brushed my arm, and I couldn't stop brushing a finger across it, just to feel the softness, the curve of her neck, the quiet life that had waited for me in her presence. "You're still trembling," I whispered, half in concern, half in awe. She exhaled, a soft, lingering laugh that vibrated against my chest. "You think I'd ever admit it?" she teased lightly, though her smile didn't hide the truth. She leaned fully against me, and for the first time, it didn't feel like anything risky, just natural, inevitable. I held her close, hands resting lightly on her back, fingers tracing patterns I'd long memorized in stolen glances. There was no rush, no urgent need to cross lines anymore. We had crossed them, yes, but now, the space between us was filled with comfort, a tangible sense of belonging that neither of us wanted to break. "I never thought someone like you," she murmured, voice soft against my chest, "would see me like this." I tilted my head to catch her gaze. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable, yet full of quiet laughter, like she'd been holding back a lifetime and finally found a place to release it. "I see you," I said simply. "Every little thing. And it's enough." Her lips brushed the corner of my mouth in a teasing, almost imperceptible kiss. Not passionate, not urgent, just hers, honest and small. I caught her hand and intertwined my fingers with hers, holding it there, letting the world shrink down to the warmth of our palms and the rhythm of our breathing. We moved slowly toward the back counter, perching on the edge, still wrapped in each other's presence. Foreheads touching, fingers entwined, legs brushing. It felt messy, human, and perfectly right. No one else, no judgment, no outside pressure, just this small universe we had carved out. I can't believe we made it here, I whispered. She laughed softly, letting her head fall against my shoulder. We did. Against our own rules, against our own fears, and yet here we are. The weight of the years, the hesitation, the age gap, the near misses, they didn't vanish, but they no longer held us hostage. Each one became part of the story we were writing together, a tapestry of risk, desire, patience, and surrender. We stayed like that for a long while, no need to move, no need to speak. Just the quiet press of bodies, the intertwining of fingers, the warmth of trust finally allowed to exist without question. Finally, she tilted her head and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. It was small, intimate, and all-encompassing, a promise and an acknowledgement at once. "We're really here, aren't we?" I asked, voice low. "Yes," she said, resting her cheek against mine. "And we're not going anywhere." For the first time, I believed it. The fear, the longing, the whispered what-ifs, they had all led us to this. Here, together, human and unguarded, messy and real. And in that quiet, lingering embrace, the world outside could wait.